On this day, 50 years ago, the world's longest-running science fiction series was born. In terms of the real world, everyone was still finding out or coming to terms with the assassination of the American President John F. Kennedy, which happened on Friday, the 22nd of November, 1963. Everyone seems to remember where they were when they found out this devastating news. That night and the following day, BBC Television, which we now know as BBC One, was interrupted by breaking news transmissions, which confirmed that Kennedy was shot while he was in a convertible vehicle, and he was killed instantly, only having been president for just over 2 years. While everyone was still in shock about the president's assassination, on BBC TV at 5:15 p.m. on Saturday the 23rd of November 1963, another thing that will be talked about for years and decades to come emerged. I am, of course, talking about Doctor Who. Today is the 799th episode in the series history. However, what I like to do today is talk about the first and how the show was created. The BBC was looking for a new science fiction show following the success of Quatermass, along with the Gerry Anderson puppet shows like Fireball XL5. In the mid-20th century, Albert Einstein inspired us all with his theories on time travel. It was obvious the BBC wanted a science fiction time travel series. The concept began in early 1962 when Eric Matchwitz, who was the assistant to the then BBC controller, Donald Wilson, who was the head of script department, he asked Wilson about the possibility of a new science fiction series. In December 1962, Sidney Newman arrived on the scene at the BBC as the new head of drama. He was an avid science fiction fan. He brainstormed ideas with fellow staff at the BBC about commissioning a science fiction show, which would fit in a 25 to half an hour slot in between Grandstand and Jukebox Jury, which was basically top of the pops of its day. Newman is the man responsible for the basics of the show. He wanted an old grumpy space alien with a time machine which was bigger on the inside than the outside. The machine was meant to shift into its surroundings, but as we all know, if you watch The Caves of Skulls, the second episode of An Unearthly Child, you will notice that the Doctor is disturbed by its outside appearance, as it remains like a police box from the 1960s. Newman wanted the time traveller to be called the Doctor, which led to him giving the series the title of Doctor Who, suggesting nobody knows who he is, and to this day everybody still asks, who is Doctor Who? The closest we've found is in the name of the Doctor and the day of the Doctor, which still shows us that even after 50 years there is still a mystery about who the Doctor really is. The closest indication to the Doctor's family is his granddaughter, Susan, who is arguably the first ever on-screen companion that the Doctor ever had. In the middle of 1963, the show started production, and the production was handed over to Verity Lambert, and the story editor was David Whittaker, although Rex Tucker also did this. Mervyn Pinfield was hired as the associate producer, as Donald Wilson feared that Verity Lambert wasn't exactly up to the job. Anthony Coburn was hired to write the first 4 episodes of the show, which would introduce the audience to the main characters, the Doctor, Susan, and school teachers Ian and Barbara. It was also Coburn who came up with the idea that the TARDIS would resemble a police telephone box, as changing its appearance week in and week out would actually cost too much for the production staff, so they thought they'd stick with the police box, and they have done so for the last 50 years. It has been joked about throughout the show why the time machine, which would be known as the TARDIS, stays the way it is on the outside, in particular in Attack of the Cybermen and Boomtown. They explain that the TARDIS has a chameleon circuit to blend into its surroundings. A relatively young director, Waris Hussein, was employed by Verity Lambert to direct the script by Anthony Coburn, which would have the overarching title, An Unearthly Child. It was Hussein who was responsible for getting established British actor William Hartnell to play the role of the Doctor. Carole Ann Ford played a 15-year-old Susan, while William Russell and Jacqueline Hill played school teachers Ian and Barbara, who in the first episode are actually kidnapped by the Doctor. Throughout the show's first season, they became his companions, and they became best friends. The first episode didn't do that well in terms of viewing figures, as transmission was interrupted by bulletins about President Kennedy. So it was repeating on the following Saturday, just before the airing of the second episode, The Cave of Skulls. Finally, I would just like to talk about a certain theme tune. You know the one I'm talking about. Made by Delia Derbyshire and written by Ron Grainer, who also wrote the theme for Steptoe and Son. The theme tune is absolutely astounding. Even to this day, it sounds so eerie and science fiction. Once that theme tune began on 5:15 that evening, many people knew that they were in for a treat, and in another month's time, the show will become the centre of media attention on BBC television, with the introduction of a certain creature with a sink puncher. And here we are, 50 years later. Doctor Who is still very much at the centre of media attention, with the release of the Day of the Doctor all around the world.
I've had many faces, many lives. I don't admit all of them. There's one life I've tried very hard to forget. Great men are forged in fire. It is the privilege of lesser men to light the flame.
The moment is coming.
I'm ready.
Oh, lovely.
Why are we all together? Why are we all here? I remember this. Almost remember.
Oh, you've redecorated.
I don't like it. For once, I would like to know where I'm going. No, you really wouldn't.
I'm looking for the Doctor.
Well, you've certainly come to the right place.